Revenge with Karen.
You can't be serious, Brittany scoffed, flipping the contract folder like it was a menu at a Chili's. Why are we still waiting on her sign-off? Tuesday, 6:17 p.m. I was 2 bites into a lukewarm turkey sandwich in the compliance room, fluorescent lights buzzing, my eyes dry from 8 straight hours of squinting at legal doc versioning. Brittany, the founder's niece and newly minted chief strategy officer, stood in the doorway wearing a blazer that screamed, "Mom bought me this for my first internship." Her voice was the exact pitch that triggers migraines. Her idea of strategy was make it look like I'm in charge, and her first order of business had been auditing everyone's workload, under the thin veil of resource streamlining. And there I was, Mary from compliance, gray cardigans and quiet emails, the designated attester for all major ops. I'd reviewed, validated, logged every contract, merger prep, vendor clause, and escrow term for the past 6 years. Never missed a deadline. Never claimed credit. Hell, most people didn't even know what a designated attester was. Brittany sure didn't, but she sure as hell was irritated that the system wasn't moving without my click. You know what? Just skip her, she snapped at the legal intern, a recent grad who visibly paled but nodded like his life depended on it. Me tell you something about this industry, or any industry really. Your loudest talkers are rarely your strongest players, and your quietest workers. They're usually the ones holding the walls up, but nobody notices until the bricks start falling. Anyway, this wasn't the first time someone had dismissed me. Wasn't the first time I'd been called a bottleneck either. I'd long ago made peace with being background noise. I wasn't invited to happy hours. Name was never dropped in town halls. But you know what I was? The one who kept their $1 million deals from falling into litigation hell. My initials at the bottom of every attested document weren't decorative. They were structural. And speaking of structure, if you're enjoying this story so far, or maybe just feeling the early tingles of corporate dread bubbling in your chest, do me a small favor. Hit that like button, and maybe, just maybe, consider subscribing. It takes 2 seconds, and I swear it's the only kind of attestation I'll ever ask of you. Plus, it really does help the team keep digging up stories like this one. Now, back to the collapse. My days were a cycle of fixing what people broke, rogue vendor uploads, missing escrow PDFs, NDA clauses someone accidentally deleted from Salesforce. The kind of work that never made headlines, but always saved asses. I had my own systems layered beneath the official platforms. My own version logs. My own alerts. You had to, when the board kept rotating execs like expired yogurt, and each newbie came in thinking they'd reinvent the company with bullet points and buzzwords. So when Brittany got the job over 3 actual qualified internal candidates, I didn't flinch. She started interrogating random staff over outside activities like she was playing a startup version of McCarthy. I didn't argue. I even smiled when she slid into the compliance thread asking why I'd signed off on a contract 6 months prior for a vendor she just learned existed. That vendor? One we used for off-site backups, approved, logged, and ironically, keeping her uncle's digital assets alive. Things took a turn when she saw my name in their quarterly review notes. See, I'd been asked to consult by their legal team. Just an hour a month, and it had been cleared under old legal before the shakeup. But Brittany, oh, she saw gold or blood. Hard to tell with her. We discovered your after-hours contract, she said, arms folded in triumph like she just cracked the Zodiac cipher. That's a conflict of interest. Pack your desk. I looked at her, at the junior counsel standing behind her, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I opened the drawer where I kept my emergency envelope. Not the HR one, not the will, the envelope, gray, sealed, stamped. I slid it across the table toward legal. He picked it up. Read the line on the front, looked at me, and I smiled just once. Then I walked out. No scene, no farewell party, no begging for my job back. Just the rhythmic click of my heels down the hallway as the system I built began to hum, quietly, into lockdown. I didn't need to shout. They were about to learn what happens when you fire the person who holds the keys to every single door. Brittany arrived like a glossy LinkedIn post that somehow learned to walk, highlighted hair, weaponized smile, and a job title that sounded like it had been invented during brunch. Chief Strategy Officer. No one really knew what she did. But suddenly, she was in every meeting, nodding solemnly at buzzwords, writing quarterly ockers like she was translating ancient prophecy, and rearranging departments based on vibes and Pinterest flowcharts. Her first week, She requested we repaint the break room millennial sage. Her second week, she ordered an internal audit. That's when the bodies started hitting the floor. Not the real ones, of course. Just the old guard. People like Lena from IT survived 2 acquisition rumors, 3 CEOs, and a ransomware scare. People like Ben from procurement, who might have been a little slow with his emails, but kept the entire vendor chain running without ever once locking us into a 5-year AI-enhanced subscription for glorified Excel macros. Brittany saw them all as dead weight. And then she saw me. At first, it was polite. "Hi, Mary. Just looping you in on a quick compliance question," and came the passive-aggressive slacks at 10:30 p.m. "Hey, saw you signed off on the Bixel contract last quarter. Did that go through new legal?" That contract had been reviewed 6 times by 2 outside firms and our old general counsel. And yes, it had gone through legal. Brittany didn't care. She'd found the name of a vendor she didn't recognize and a way to make herself look powerful. So she called it a conflict. The vendor, its sized off-site storage partner with a 3-month maintenance project. They'd asked me to advise on their internal compliance checklist because, ironically, Aviron's leadership had once offered me up as the gold standard for pre-audit hygiene. 1 hour a month, on my own time, cleared in writing. But Brittany smelled blood. She called it dual commitments. She called it brand confusion. She called it a signal of divided loyalty. Then she called a meeting. Not HR, just Brittany, one of her lackeys, and a poor junior counsel who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mary," she began, leaning back in the chair like she was on Succession. "We've completed our audit and discovered your after-hours contract." She paused dramatically, like a villain in a bad TV pilot. I said nothing. Just watched her with the kind of deadpan face you earn from 6 years of correcting executives who don't read what they sign. "That's a breach of policy under our new ethics framework," she continued, "so you'll need to box your desk." The silence that followed was loud. I looked at her, then turned to the junior counsel. "This vendor," I said flatly, "was approved in writing. Would you like me to forward the email?" Brittany cut in. "It's not about the past. It's about the appearance of conflict." Ah, there it was. Brittany's gospel, optics over reality, form over function. Clap louder and the truth disappears. I reached into my drawer. Now, for anyone else, this is where the panic sets in. The flailing, the excuses, the desperate appeals to reason. But I'm not anyone else. I'm the one who signed every attestation for every major transaction this company has processed for 6 years. I'm the name on the bottom of the M and a readiness tracker. I'm the final tick box in our legal pipeline. And more importantly, I built the damn system. Gray envelope wasn't flashy. It had no logo, no cry for help. Just a string of numbers on the front, 8.3 designated attester revocation notice. The junior counsel's eyes flicked to the label. He froze. I placed it in front of him. Then I nodded once. Calm, measured, the way you nod when you already know the ending. Then I stood up. No tears, no yelling, just quiet control. Brittany watched me with a smirk that faltered ever so slightly, like something in the air had shifted and she couldn't name it. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. "Good luck with your audits," and I walked. Down the hallway past the poster with our core values: integrity, innovation, inclusion. Past the wall of platitudes the founder had installed after his 3rd media scandal. Past the buzzing printer, still churning out the Q3 investor deck, one that still had my name watermarked faintly in the metadata. Behind me, the door clicked shut. That envelope was more than paper. It was a trigger, a key, a silent alarm that no one remembered existed because no one ever bothered to read the compliance tree I spent months embedding into our infrastructure. Brittany thought she'd cut the fat. She was about to find out she'd amputated the spine. The gray envelope landed on internal counsel's desk like a pebble on a pond, quiet, small, but sending out ripples that would soon crack the foundation. Alex, mid-level counsel assigned to internal escalations, peeled it open expecting a resignation. That's what Brittany told him after all. She quit, she'd shrugged, already halfway through reassigning Mary's responsibilities to an overwhelmed junior analyst who didn't even have access credentials for the compliance dashboard. But this wasn't a resignation. It was a formal notice. A single printed page, no drama, just the icy precision of someone who knew exactly where the nerve endings were. Header, Clause 8.3, designated attester vacancy protocol. Signed, timestamped, delivered in accordance with policy. Alex stared at it like it was written in cuneiform, because, in his defense, Clause 8.3 wasn't part of the normal onboarding packet. It had been buried 2 years prior during a full-stack compliance overhaul. Of those legal hygiene projects no one wants to touch until something goes catastrophically wrong. Mary had led it, quietly, efficiently, with input from outside counsel, finance, and yes, the CTO. The result had been a new chain of control for all sensitive operations, audits, contracts, investor attestations, anything that touched regulatory fingers. At the center of it was one role, designated attester, and it had exactly one name tied to it, Mary's. Clause 8.3 wasn't symbolic. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a structural requirement. The designated attester's credentials weren't just a name on a form, they were embedded directly into the attestation subsystem. Any audit trail lacking her ID was flagged incomplete. Any document processed without her sign-off was invalidated downstream. The system was smart like that, because she had made it smart like that. Alex called legal ops. Legal ops called IT. IT pulled up the logs, and that's when the room went quiet, because the system had already reacted. The compliance dashboard, normally a sea of green check marks and timelines, was now blinking red. Slowly, steadily, not catastrophic, not yet, but the locks were engaging. Every pending transaction marked awaiting attester validation. Every outbound audit folder stamped incomplete compliance chain. Automated alert had already been sent to the acquisition partner's shared inbox. Back at her apartment, Mary was curled on the couch in an old sweatshirt, one leg draped over the side, wine glass balanced on a coaster made from a repurposed NDA. The apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of her air purifier and the occasional buzz from her phone. She watched the screen of her laptop as the logs updated in real time. Her access still worked, read-only. Course by design. She'd built in a delay buffer, 72 hours of ghost access before the full blackout, long enough to observe, long enough to sip and smile. Red, 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 there it was, the domino line. Every system she'd propped up, every thread of automation that legal and ops and risk had leaned on without ever truly understanding it, was now pulsing with warnings. Her favorite part? The wording she'd personally chosen for the first-tier alerts. Validation halt, authorized designated attester not found. Please refer to Protocol Tree Section 8.3 for reinstatement instructions. Nobody had ever clicked that link. She tested it once, then hid it beneath 3 layers of documentation. Because that's what they always did, didn't they? Skim the bullets, sign the deck, ignore the footnotes. Mary never ignored footnotes. Back at HQ, Brittany was oblivious. Was in the executive lounge doing a vision alignment session with marketing, probably sketching a mood board for Q4 synergy. Legal was less oblivious. Alex stood at the window in the conference room, holding the page like it might start speaking if he stared long enough. IT was confirming, no override access, no admin reassignments. The system recognized one signature and one signature only, Mary's, and she'd revoked it. Attempts to reassign the role failed. The compliance software returned the same message again and again. Invalid authorization token, original assignee required for reinstatement. An intern suggested they manually backdate a new signature to avoid triggering alerts. But that's when they found the second trigger, a logic trap Mary had baked in for just such an occasion. A backdated override would automatically ping the company's external auditor and the insurance liaison with a potential fraud warning. So now they were boxed in. They couldn't complete the pending M and a diligence. They couldn't reassign the attester role. They couldn't even delete the logs because Mary had set the permissions to mirror external audit standards. Across town, Mary refreshed the dashboard. She took a long sip of wine, still blinking red. Perfect. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was just the prelude, the polite knock before the storm. The warning shot fired into the air so no one could say they weren't warned. Let them sweat. Let them call each other and point fingers and flip through contracts looking for a loophole that wasn't there. Let them learn what it feels like to run compliance on memory and wishful thinking. She closed the laptop. Her phone buzzed once. A calendar invite. Subject line, quick chat. You see acquisition partner, her smile deepened. The suits arrived early. Navy blue, pressed within an inch of their lives, armed with silver laptops and polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The acquisition team from Kelbridge Capital had flown in from New York the night before and were already seated in the Aviron boardroom by 8:00 a.m., mugs of untouched coffee steaming on the table like set pieces. It was the big day. due diligence, moment where all the pitch decks and founder stories, and we're like Slack, but for AI-driven compliance, had to stand up to the brutal math of valuation models and infrastructure audits. Brittany sauntered in 15 minutes late with a venti oat milk latte and a blazer 2 sizes too tight, chirping something about vibes being excellent this quarter. She gestured vaguely at the monitors as if to say, "Behold, our empire." Then sat down, crossed her legs like a talk show host, and waited for someone else to speak. At first, things went smoothly. The buyers logged into the compliance portal. Vendor folders loaded. A few contracts downloaded just fine. The CTO ran through his prepared demo with all the confidence of a man who had no idea a time bomb had already gone off under his chair. And then, 3 clicks in, it started. The first document loaded with a red banner, pending attestation, document incomplete. Then another. Critical compliance invalidation, no designated attester on record. The legal lead from Kelbridge tilted her head. "That's odd," she said, clicking a third file. Same result. She turned to Aviron's legal team, brows furrowed. "Why are the compliance logs missing sign-off from the attester?" Alex, now officially regretting every career choice that led him to this moment, cleared his throat. "We were transitioning roles at the moment. There was a miscommunication." The lead replied, unimpressed. She typed something into her spreadsheet. "Well, this puts us in a tricky position. These gaps will freeze us from proceeding until they are reconciled. Can you walk us through who the attester is and when they'll be reinstated?" All eyes turned to Brittany. She blinked once. "Oh, her? We let her go." Silence. "You let go of your compliance attester?" The buyer asked slowly, like translating a bad dream. "For diligence?" Brittany gave a little laugh. "I mean, the system just uses a rubber stamp anyway, right? We can just assign someone else." "No," the buyer said flatly. "No, you can't." Now the air shifted. It was that corporate shift you can feel in your bones, the warmth sucked out of the room, smiles replaced with polite tension. People adjusting ties, notes being scribbled. Laptops clicking not with enthusiasm, but suspicion. The Kelbridge lead leaned forward. Was the designated attester? Brittany looked to legal. Legal looked to IT. IT looked like they wanted to crawl into the ceiling and die quietly next to the HVAC unit. "Mary Wexler," Alex said finally. The lead frowned. "The same Mary who signed off on the Q2 systems audit, the one with embedded access triggers." "Yes," Alex muttered. "And you fired her?" "Yes." No one said anything for a long moment. The only sound was the soft whir of the wall-mounted projector, which now seemed to glow like a heat lamp over a pile of raw meat. The lead sighed and shut her laptop. "I'm going to pause this meeting," she said, "until we figure out whether any of this data is even valid." Brittany stammered. "This is just a hiccup. I mean, these are just technicalities." "No," the buyer said, voice cool and final. "These are clauses. This isn't about someone forgetting to update a folder. This is a missing legal requirement. Can't proceed with due diligence without a valid attester on record." She stood, nodded once to the group, and walked out. One by one, the others followed. Back in her apartment, Mary watched the security feed from the boardroom. She hadn't meant to hack anything. No, that would imply some kind of malicious intent. But she had asked for a temporary off-site access badge during her final weeks just to clean out old files, and the IT guy, bless him, had never revoked it. Sometimes ghosts don't need to break in. Sometimes they're still on the guest list. She sipped her coffee and watched as Brittany scrolled furiously through her inbox, looking for an explanation that didn't exist. On her own screen, Mary refreshed the attestation queue. Dozens of documents sat there, grayed out, frozen in time. She flipped open her notebook. It was an old habit, analog in a digital world. She made a neat little check mark under a line titled, "Triggers post-revocation." Dashboard lock done, attestation invalidation done, auditor alert sent done, buyer log pinged done. She smiled. The beauty of it wasn't the chaos. It was the silence that followed. The gradual tightening of the noose, not with violence, but with precision. She hadn't said a word. She hadn't needed to. The system was speaking for her now. By noon, the gloves were off. Brittany slammed the conference room door so hard a framed employee core values poster tilted sideways behind her. "Just get someone else in the role." She barked at legal, arms folded, ego bruised and bleeding all over the table. Alex, already on his third and tacit tablet, pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's not that simple," he said, for the 4th time that hour. "The role isn't just a title. It's identity verified. It's Mary. We make it someone else." Brittany insisted, like you could just replace a fire alarm with a scented candle and pray nothing sparked. She's gone. It's done. Across the room, someone from IT cleared their throat. Actually, he said, tapping nervously on a laptop, it's not just a matter of assigning a new name. The attestation system uses a multi-factor protocol. Biometrics, her fingerprint, retina scan, a legal countersignature from the original designation authority. Brittany blinked. What does that mean? It means, Alex said grimly, even if you appoint someone new, the system won't recognize them unless she approves the transfer. And even then, it takes her physical input to bind it. She built the damn thing, the IT guy added. She hard-coded it into the root branch of the compliance tree. If we try to bypass or spoof the keys, it sends automated fraud flags to all our audit partners. Brittany stared like she'd just been told the fire extinguisher required a retina scan. So she made herself irreplaceable. She made herself compliant, Alex corrected. Y'all just never paid attention. A long silence followed. Then Brittany, voice low, said, "Can we backdate a transfer form? Say it happened before she left." Alex turned pale. "We can't." A backdated signature would immediately trigger the dual ledger verification. The timestamp mismatches. The system logs everything, and all those logs are mirrored to external storage, including our auditors and the insurance firm. A beat. "You mean she started?" "Yes," Alex said. "We'd get flagged for retroactive fraud. Possibly invalidate our audit trail for the last 2 quarters. Possibly tank the acquisition entirely." Brittany dropped into a chair like gravity had just doubled. And across the city, Mary sat in a sunbeam, gently flipping through a worn-out copy of the protocol tree she'd printed the night she slipped that gray envelope into her bag. The document was thick, nearly 200 pages, each one numbered, watermarked, and signed. Not by her, by the founder, twice, once in ink, once digitally. Clause 8.3 was the headline grabber, sure, but the branches, roots, those were hers. She turned the page, sipping iced coffee from a cracked mason jar. Section 8.3.1, Attester reassignment subroutine. Her initials in the margin. A line that read, "In the absence of the designated attester, all system functions requiring legal certification shall remain in suspension until the original credential holder re-engages or formally delegates authority with biometric and legal key match." Translation. Good luck. Brittany, her phone buzzed. She checked it lazily. A new email. Subject, quick chat. From partner Kelbridge Capital. She smiled. They weren't reaching out to legal, or the CTO, or that VP who liked to talk over her in QBRs and then used her phrasing in his decks. They were reaching out to her. Mary closed the protocol tree and slid it gently back into its folder. She knew they'd come. She didn't build the system out of paranoia. She built it because, for 6 years, no one had taken compliance seriously. Not until it could cost them something. Now it was costing them everything. She stood, walked to the window. Outside, the world went on. People jaywalking, dogs barking at delivery trucks, a man on a scooter trying not to get flattened by a bus. Behind her, her laptop blinked. Another access attempt failed. Another fraud alert sent. She'd linked it to a custom Slack webhook before she left. One last private joke. Every failed override attempt posted to a channel named #good luck with that. It had 29 messages so far. Back at Aviron, panic settled like humidity. The CTO was now looped in. He demanded to know why no one flagged this vulnerability sooner. Alex snapped that it had been in the protocol deck for 2 years, and maybe, if someone had read more than the first 3 slides, they'd know Mary wasn't just the compliance lady. She was the firewall. Meanwhile, the Kelbridge team had gone dark. No follow-ups, no rescheduled diligence. Just one message sitting in Mary's inbox. "Would love to chat when convenient. You seem integral." She tapped out a polite reply. "Happy to talk tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll send an invite. I assume you've seen the logs." A minute later, the read receipt popped. She smiled again, folded her hands behind her head, watched the sunlight stretch across her floor like a slow fuse. They weren't just trying to undo her. They were realizing they couldn't. The first leak didn't come from legal. It came from finance. Someone on the exit comp team, probably too young or too stressed to remember their NDA, let slip to a department thread that the merger bonuses were on hold until compliance recertification is completed. Within minutes, Slack lit up like a Christmas tree wired wrong. Threads exploded. Side channels bloomed. People who hadn't spoken to each other in months were suddenly trading conspiracy theories with the enthusiasm of Reddit detectives. Did you hear the deal's frozen? Someone said all the attestation logs are invalid. Wait, wasn't that Mary's job? You mean the lady they fired without telling anyone? Bro, my bonus was tied to Q4 close. I already put down payment on a hybrid Lexus. Word moved fast. Faster than HR, faster than spin. By the end of the day, the hallway air was thick with anxiety and burnt coffee. People started printing resumes at the office printer. Someone filed a vacation request for December 15th, marked final week before acquisition close hopefully, with a question mark bolded. It was petty. It was perfect. Brittany, meanwhile, had gone full ghost. Her once daily "we've got this" team-wide affirmations vanished. She canceled her standing meetings. Rumor was she'd tried to call Kelbridge herself and had been politely informed that all communications would now go through legal channels. She screamed at Alex in a closed-door meeting that this was supposed to be her moment. Alex, who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, reportedly replied, "Then maybe you shouldn't have amputated the one person keeping the heart beating." The founder, Greg, held an emergency call with the board. No one could confirm what was said. By afternoon, his calendar was marked OOO investor reorg planning. Another rumor. Meanwhile, Mary was silent. Not one post, not one call, not one email. She hadn't responded to the Slack message legal sent her, nor the voicemail Brittany left under the brittle guise of rebuilding bridges. The official letter, couriered to her apartment in a fancy cream envelope, was still sealed on her desk, unopened, next to her terrarium and a half-eaten cranberry scone. He didn't need to reply, because she'd already spoken. Aviron's audit logs were still triggering. Every attempt to reroute compliance through another system caused the same result: ping, fail, alert sent. A spreadsheet she'd quietly programmed a year ago, titled Activation Flags, External Audit Protocols, was running in the background. It was set to auto-email every 36 hours to 4 external parties: Aviron's insurance compliance monitor, Kelbridge due diligence team, an SEC compliance partner, and Mary herself. Each email contained the same thing: a timestamped CSV of every flagged compliance failure, sorted by severity, with a neat little footer: no valid attestation credential on file. Clause 8.3 breach. Immediate action recommended. She hadn't lifted a finger in days. And yet, every attempt to bypass her structure only stitched her name deeper into the fabric. Internal conversations shifted from blame to desperation. At 3:14 p.m., legal formally sent her a new offer: return temporarily as a consultant, just long enough to unlock the system and restore basic function. Full pay, no hard feelings, retroactive neutral reference. Mary read the PDF once, then archived it. No reply. They didn't want her back. They wanted a Band-Aid. And Mary wasn't in the wound-stitching business anymore, not for people who treated her like printer ink, until they realized she was the motherboard. She spent the afternoon watching sparrows land on the railing of her fire escape, sipping chamomile tea and highlighting her copy of the compliance protocol like she was editing a memoir. At Aviron, panic had gone procedural. Someone tried to spin it as a temporary systems issue in a company-wide email, but they forgot to BCC. Replies started flying. An engineer replied all with, "You fired the only person who could press the damn green button. Admit it." Someone else replied, "Tell Brittany to try one of her mood boards." It got worse. The exit packages had been promised. Some team leads had already drafted farewell emails. A few had even framed their startup hoodies to commemorate the impending buyout. Now, all on pause. The internal M and a dashboard, once brimming with color-coded bars of progress, now read status. On hold pending compliance reinstatement, Mary watched it flicker across the shared link someone had forwarded her. She didn't laugh. She didn't cry. She just closed the tab. Across the room, her second monitor pinged. Another access attempt. Another alert triggered. The auto mailer spun into motion. And in her inbox, like clockwork, came a single automated confirmation from the system she'd built. Activation log #442 external log sent. Next dispatch, 36 hours passive. Surgical. She didn't need to twist the knife. They were twisting it just fine without her. The CTO, Darren, had a permanent sunburn from years of tropical offsites and zero sunscreen. But that morning, under the glow of 3 monitors and a single damning PDF, looked pale for the first time anyone could remember. "Wait," he muttered, scrolling through a document that looked like it hadn't been opened since the Ice Age. Clause 8.3.1, this was part of the system charter. External legal, 2 suits from a white shoe firm Kelbridge insisted on roping in, nodded grimly. Yes, signed by your founder. Twice. First on initiation, then again during the infrastructure revision. Brittany was sitting in the corner of the war room now, arms crossed so tightly her nails were turning purple. Her once flawless blowout looked like it had survived a hurricane. A half-drunk green juice sat sweating next to her laptop, untouched. Someone explain it again, she said, like repetition could unbreak the situation. The younger attorney cleared her throat. Clause 8.3.1 assigns sole attestation authority to one credentialed identity. In this case, Mary Wexler. Clause 8.3.1 requires her biometric signature to transfer or relinquish that authority. Clause 8.3.1 B requires written consent of the founder or acting CEO to override it. Both must occur in tandem. Otherwise, the system flags all subsequent actions as non-compliant. Darren looked up. And if we just pull logs and fake the credentials? Both lawyers gave identical expressions, something between pity and disbelief. Then every file touched after the override attempt becomes toxic. Your whole deal history, unusable. Your audit trail, unverifiable. Your sale? The older attorney shook his head. Dead in the water. Brittany stared at the screen like it was written in ancient Greek. We fired the only person who could legally validate our sale. No one answered. There it was. The truth laid out, cold and clear, not sabotage, not hacking, just a system designed correctly. So correctly that it required diligence, continuity, and respect for roles to function. 3 things Aviron had discarded the moment someone with better optics and a family connection wanted a bigger chair. Mary hadn't set a trap. She'd built a machine. They tripped over it because they assumed it was ornamental. Somewhere, deep in the archived Slack history, someone unearthed an old message Mary had sent 2 years ago during the compliance revamp. Just a heads up. Attestation redesign is live. Check clause 8.3 if you're ever tempted to reroute without me. Grinning face with sweat, they hadn't checked it. They'd laughed at the emoji. Now, the company's future hung on that clause. The external auditors refused to proceed without clean lineage from the original attester. Insurance compliance liaison replied with a curt line. Attestation invalid. Risk coverage suspended until rectified. Kelbridge's diligence team sent a formal notice pausing all activity, citing structural discrepancies in compliance flow. And all because of a clause signed by Greg, the founder himself, in blue ink with a flourish, back when Mary had redesigned the architecture, because she was the only one who cared enough to future-proof it. Greg, now pretending to be strategically disengaged from Brittany's decisions, was conveniently unreachable. Rumor had it he'd flown to Jackson Hole for clarity. Meanwhile, back in Mary's apartment, the wine glass was gone, replaced by a plain mug of black coffee and a to-do list with only one item left unchecked. She flipped open her notebook again, running a finger down the protocol map. Every node, every branch, every authorization handshake. They all ended with her. Hadn't sabotaged anything. She hadn't leaked documents, hadn't changed passwords, hadn't exploited a single loophole. She had followed policy. She had written policy. What was happening to Aviron wasn't revenge. It was architecture. She wasn't angry, not anymore, just finished. They'd mistaken silence for absence. But silence had just been her way of letting the system speak. And the system was screaming. She pulled open her laptop. Another ping, another failed override attempt from Aviron. She watched the trigger fire, saw the log file bundle itself neatly and email off to Kelbridge and their audit attorneys. At the bottom of the screen, one final message from her custom Slack bot popped into her feed. Good luck with that, user. CTO attempted reassignment protocol. Flagged. Alert dispatched. Time, 11:03 a.m. EST severity, critical. She closed the window. Folded the notebook. Let them drown in the rulebook they never read. The call was scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. on a Thursday. No fluff, no preamble. The calendar invite simply read, Kelbridge Compliance Restoration Discussion Location. Zoom. Duration, 30 minutes. Attendees, 2 partners. 1 Mary Wexler. Mary didn't bother with makeup. She wore a faded navy hoodie with a coffee stain from a month ago and tied her hair back like she was about to change a tire. She brewed a fresh pot of coffee, set her protocol binder to the side, and signed in exactly 60 seconds late. Just to remind them who controlled the clock now. The screen opened with 2 faces, mid-40s, polished but not overdone. One wore a smart vest. The other looked like he hadn't slept since Sunday. Mary, the first one, greeted, trying not to sound too enthusiastic. "Thanks for joining. We appreciate your time." She gave a small nod. "Oh, smile." Before we dive in, the second partner added, "We want to clarify, we're not here representing Aviron. We're simply trying to understand what's required to move forward." Mary tilted her head slightly. "Then let's not waste time." She pulled up a PDF and shared her screen. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a list of demands written in red ink or dramatized with legalese. It was a price list. Scope: temporary compliance restoration duration, 5 days. Fee: $175,000 USD, wired in advance. Deliverables: restoration of attestation pipeline, clean validation chain, external audit clearance, non-negotiables. No interaction with current Aviron leadership, permanent NDA regarding cause of attestation failure. Right of refusal on any future system rebuilds. Signatory status on all new compliance designations going forward. She finished reading and let the silence hang. The partners glanced at each other. "No performance clauses?" one asked. She shook her head. "You've already reviewed the system. You know it works." Another pause, then a quiet nod. "Agreed," the older one said. Mary clicked the second tab and uploaded the file. A streamlined version of the Attester protocol. Digitally signed, time-stamped, version-controlled. Detailed the steps she would take to reactivate the chain without exposing them to fraud flags or triggering another compliance stall. "This is the update," she said. "Once funds clear, you'll receive activation credentials, deployment keys, and documentation. Your team will get a mirrored copy for internal legal." "And Aviron?" they asked. "Isn't my concern anymore." There was something surgical in her voice. Not vengeful, not smug, just the crisp edge of someone who no longer had anything to prove. They accepted her terms by 11:03 a.m. By 11:07, the wire confirmation hit her inbox. By noon, she'd submitted the first of 3 activation packets to the Kelbridge audit portal. And at 12:14 p.m., she sent the file that had been sitting on her desktop for 3 days, named simply Attester Protocol Restoration, Build Final PDF, digitally signed, SHA 256 hash certified, logged in 2 compliance blockchains, and mirrored to external storage in Zurich and Denver. She didn't CC Aviron. She didn't need to. The buyer now had everything they needed, and none of it went through the company that had spent the last 2 weeks publicly imploding and privately begging to be let back into a room she now owned. There was no call with Brittany. No apology letter from Greg. No public acknowledgement of their failure. Just silence. And on the other end of it, Mary, standing tall in her living room, window open, air cool and clean, the city humming like a background track to a very different life. Control wasn't loud. It wasn't about status meetings or Slack channels or walking into the boardroom in high heels and declarations. Control was clicking send on a protocol that made everything work again, and knowing they'd never, ever touch it without her. At precisely 8:01 a.m. on Monday morning, the lights blinked green across Aviron's compliance dashboard. No announcement, no flourish, just a quiet shift from red to green as if the last 2 weeks of chaos had never happened. Files unlocked, audit chains unjammed. The attestation pipeline flickered back to life like a heartbeat restarting after flatlining. Due diligence resumed. Kelbridge's team returned to the boardroom like surgeons stepping back into the or after scrubbing in. No smiles, no small talk. They signed the deal by noon. Wire transfers initiated. Closing documents stamped. The buyout machine resumed with surgical precision, repaired, revalidated, and finally compliant. But the air inside Aviron was different now. Legal didn't speak above a whisper. Ops didn't make eye contact. CTO stayed in his office with the blinds drawn and his phone off. Brittany's desk sat empty. Her monitor had already been boxed. No one said her name, but everyone knew. The board had quietly executed a realignment of leadership responsibilities late Sunday night. The language in the email was polite, sterile words like transition and gratitude floated through the company-wide memo like rose petals over a closed casket. Behind the scenes, everyone knew she'd been the scapegoat, the sacrificial lamb, the niece who flew too close to the compliance clause. Greg, the founder, sat at the end of the signing table like someone had removed his batteries. Gone was the performative grin, the startup swagger, the buzzword Tourette's. He just stared at the last page of the agreement, hand hovering over the pen like it weighed 50 pounds. When he finally signed, he didn't look up. No one clapped. Ink was still wet when Mary's phone buzzed. Transfer complete. Bonus deposit confirmed. She'd been watching from afar, not to gloat, just to verify. She had her own copies of the logs now, her own hashes, a new suite of credentials encrypted and stored under her control. Moments later, a second notification came through. Subject: post-transaction proposal from partner Kelbridge Capital. The message was short. Mary, like to discuss a more permanent arrangement. Our legal team has reviewed your protocol design and believes it would be a cornerstone for our new compliance infrastructure. You would lead it, structure it, name your terms, let us know. She didn't respond right away. She stood instead, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself a single ounce of bourbon into a chipped glass with the Aviron logo faded halfway off. A gift from a company offsite 3 years ago, back when they still sent her invites. She took a sip and let the silence settle. Across the city, someone in Kelbridge's legal division opened the final audit packet. Inside was the complete restoration protocol, time-stamped and signed by 1M. Wexler. Nestled behind it was a scanned PDF of the original envelope she'd slid across the table. Gray, unassuming, with one phrase stamped in neat block letters, Clause 8.3 Attester revocation protocol critical. They filed it under a new section in their records. Label: critical protocol status, closed, completed, do not override. Mary sat back down and finally opened her reply window. Subject: post-transaction proposal body, happy to discuss. I'll send times. But please, next time, maybe read the clause before you fire the person who wrote it. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.